Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Raw Onion. I am your host, Stephanie Ohanessian, founder of Triage Coaching and Consulting. And we have our magician behind the scenes where none of this would be possible without the dear Yoshie Barnett, who is running everything that we cannot see, but we would be nothing without her. She is the owner and founder of Lotus Flower Journey. And before I introduce our special guest today, we know it's a new month, and we know that in a new month, what do? We have a new series. And this series actually has been requested multiple times now. And we're going to really hone into the depths of why, but I just wanted to kind of explain this to you first, beautiful listeners. We're starting with this concept of the aging brain. And we're going to go deep. We're going to go into different variations, and especially with our guest today, she's going to leverage so much new, glorious information that I guarantee you've never heard before. But the requests had come in because, let's face it, we are at a juncture in life and humanity where we are living longer than we ever have before. We are having families later than we ever have had before. And luckily, we are finally able to have conversations that we have never had the chance to have before in generations past. And these are not taboo conversations anymore. These are things that are part of the dialogue, and it is necessary. And that is why, this episode in particular, we're starting out with the young brain, the child, the teenager, the brain under construction, the influence over those malleable minds. Who is really orchestrating that incredible development? It's a big responsibility. And today, aside from the neurology and the neuroscience of what happens, we're going far beyond that. We're talking about the responsibility, the natural development of the mind, and how important the people are around that developing mind. So we're not pointing fingers, but we're taking responsibility, and this offers something for everyone. And that is really what the Raw Onion is about, right? We share stories, we talk, and we really offer insight to things that every single one of us is dealing with. So on that note, I'd love to, with absolute honor, it is a privilege to have with us today our beautiful guest. Poonam Saxena is a keynote, TEDx and South by Southwest speaker, writer, two-time author, and an Asian Indian who grew up in rural Georgia after integration in the 1970s, where her family was the only Indian family in the community for over a decade. She has been an outsider for most of her life and could never as a child have imagined where her life journey would take her. Poonam honed those experiences as a second-generation Indian American. She began her work in advocacy for over 35 years after realizing the conflict that Asian Indian women feel between their collectivist cultural homes and the individualistic American society in which they live. These are big, real topics. Poonam holds a BA in psychology from Emory University and a Master's of Education from University of South Florida, plus a doctorate from Florida Southern College, studying the cultural identity of Asian American Indian women and their experiences in America as second-generation college students. She is also a freelance writer. On top of this, I could go on and on. I'm getting goosebumps just reading about this. She is a freelance writer for Edutopia and Medium. Poonam speaks to the unique experiences of cultural bias, hello, hot topic for us all, the model minority stereotype, parent engagement in schools, Asian student challenges, and empowering South Asian women's voices in leadership, all of which is mandatory to bring and highlight into our complex discourse today. Her signature TEDx talk, The Key to Student Success, highlights the minority experience in school while growing up as, quote-unquote other. In addition to her work, Poonam enjoys hanging out with her husband and her 4 children, traveling, reading, cooking, and running. I hope you will all fall in love with her as Yoshie and I have. And Poonam, welcome to the Raw Onion.
Well, thank you. You gave me such an energetic introduction. I think we're done, aren't we?
We're far from done, my friend, but this is what you bring to the table. We are genuinely this thrilled to have you, sincerely.
Well, thank you. I am thrilled to be here. And what you and Yoshi are doing is so important. Peeling back those layers and finding out what the core issues are and how do we move them forward. We can't move forward if we don't go back and understand how we even started this journey. So much of what we do is just rote because we're supposed to. No, not necessarily. So
No.
I love that you're peeling back the onion. I love
Thank you.
that.
Well, and that's why it's a big deal that you're here because, you're speaking to a lot of different really culturally hot topics. And again, this is something that is exciting because it's time we all wove this into our daily life. This is the fabric of our story collectively as human beings, right? And these are stories that have not been told and nor woven in. To your point, a lot has been designed. We're pushing that away and we're peeling that off.
I love it. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I mean, talk to me. Now, you're an incredible mind. This education is blowing me away, first of all. And, when you and I and Yoshie had chatted before, we had talked a lot about the education system. And that is something that I would love to dive into, not only as a standalone topic today, but as a cultural topic. Because, growing up as other and fitting in or needing, and listeners, I'm putting air quotes in needing to fit in, it's complex, and especially with a child's mind, a developing mind, a teenage mind. Tell me a little bit about how you came into this field. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay. And then we'll talk about the education system
Please.
and how we're disconnected from it.
Please.
So I did grow up in rural Georgia, and the reason I'm so passionate about getting a partnership together is because my parents were immigrants. They had no support they had from any other Indian families. They didn't have support from their peers, whether it was my quote unquote friends' parents or the school. And so I was a good reader. I was a good student. I took the gifted test in first grade. I never went to kindergarten because it wasn't mandatory back then. So I didn't do that. But in first grade, my teacher said you needed to have her tested. Okay, great. She didn't pass. Second grade, they test me again. I didn't pass the second time. And I distinctly remember that day as if it was yesterday. Because it completely destroyed me. I couldn't figure out why I wasn't smart enough to be in this unique category where smart kids went. And my self-confidence was destroyed. My motivation to study went from 100 to 50. I went from an A student to a CD student. And now I can understand, as a former teacher and having been in education for so long, that we didn't have the cultural awareness of the nuances and idioms and colloquialisms that we had in our everyday lives. My first language is not English. So when your first language is not English, it's very difficult to take assessments or even have spoken conversations without missing some of those key elements that are unique to America and to American English. So, yeah, that's how it started. And I fell into education because I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What else can a non smart person do? I'm going to get married and have children. Okay. Very naive, very, self deprecating, as my children tell me now. But we are so often conditioned to speak in that voice of self deprecation, especially women. We don't give ourselves the latitude to embrace. So when I fell into education, I started seeing the discrepancy not only ethnically, but I started seeing it socioeconomically and by neighborhoods and by experiences, families who had traveled, families that had never left the community. And every community is so unique. And yet we never think about that. And so I started advocating for that when my children started school. I'm like, you know what? Every kid needs an opportunity. And if we are not providing that equitable opportunity, then we are losing them. I lost 25 years of my life. I am hell bent that there's no other kid that will ever sit in my shoes. And it's not because I feel like I'm some hero. I feel like our education system doesn't allow any flexibility.
Well, it's so incredible what you mentioned because these are things that are in our faces every single day. And so much of the time, nobody really wants to look at it because it is, to in using your word, inequitable. And
Mhm.
the irony in that is, especially as children, kids are not reacting, they're predicting. They're prediction machines. And it doesn't take much to recognize, because children do not particularly absorb language, they absorb feeling, they absorb energy. And we talked about that in prior podcasts, that they are brilliant in assessing where they do fit in and where they don't fit in. And just like your experience early on in life, oh, well, you were brilliant, but you didn't fit into this mold. You didn't make the cut, whatever that means in that designed atmosphere, right? And so at that age, now that prediction has been set, that tone has been set.
And how many students do we cast aside because they're not fitting into a standard classroom setting? And maybe their experience is different. Maybe they're the ones that are brilliant and we need to be learning from them. Because my belief is that every one of us has some kind of gift to offer someone else. And if we are not tapping into those gifts, we're not growing, we're not learning, we're not being human, we're being robots.
Well, do you think it is a fair thing to say, as kids, they're learning what to expect from the world at that tender age?
I think they're learning how to fit into a world that is not conducive to a lot of human interaction. We've actually cut a lot of the social activities of these students. There are not many students who go to recess. I loved recess. You got a chance to talk, you got to hang out with your friends. 20 minutes, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But because the curricula, the education is so prescribed, that we've forgotten that human interaction is a huge part of learning.
Now, what do you think about this sort of dance between, yes, we have to send our kids to school, but also this core learning environment of the home? And we all have different experiences of the home, but also being able to sort of celebrate. And this is something that I've seen kids struggle with too, right? They're figuring out what their identity is. And so on one end, they come home. And now I would love to hear from you on this, because this is a body of your work.
Mhm.
They come home, it's a very specific, culturally colored home. with traditions, with a certain set of values that they honor, that they have been taught to honor, they have inherited in their DNA. We know this. And then
Yeah.
they go out into the world, they go in their world, that is school. And now they are, for lack of a better word, forced to conform into a system that was not designed to elevate them to their utmost. How do we reconcile raising children to be their authentic selves where they're forced to do this strange eggshell dance every day of the week?
Stephanie, you are blowing my mind because I feel like you had just described my life in 2 minutes. It's living a dual life. We talk about all these TV shows right now are like double, what are they called? Double spies or
Yeah, yep. Or,
I
yeah,
forget the term. But and I'm like, okay, this is my life because we would go home and we were Indian. We ate Indian food. We spoke in Hindi. We did our Indian cultural activities. We would sit down and watch Bollywood movies. That's how we connected with our culture. And then we would go out and all of a sudden now we're American.
yeah.
And it's not just clothing and attitude, it's language and the trans language that we're constantly having to do, the code switching.
Oh, yes.
And how do you merge all of that into an identity? And you really can't until you get to college and you're on your own and you're sitting with yourself in a dual identity, and that's when you start extracting different parts of your identity and merging them together, because from 0 to 18 you're pretty much under your guardian's care, and they're directing what you're exposed to. But college is really the first time you ever get that opportunity to sit and figure out who you are.
If you go to college.
Or when you become independent.
Sure.
Once you graduate from high school and decide what you want to do. And if you leave home, that's the first time you have an opportunity to even think about that. Everything else has been conditioned for you. It's been prescribed for you. Your home life has been designed, whether you maintain your culture or you don't. And when I talk about culture, I'm not just talking about ethnicity, right? I'm talking about socioeconomic. I'm talking about hourly workers versus salaried workers,
Yep.
blue collar versus white collar, education versus non-education, however we define education,
LGBTQ plus. There's
identity,
absolutely identity.
and gender identity. So there's so many aspects and layers of the onion when we
Yep.
look at an individual, and we're sitting in a classroom and we're still using a a system that was not designed for the community and the society we live in now. The American education system was built off of Puritan principles, teaching the principles of Jesus because that's what the British
Yeah.
settlers did. They wanted to carry on that education of Jesus, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we are no longer a society that still fits that mold. We have so much diversity and so many opportunities to learn all of these different aspects of culture and traditions and values. And every one of them is so rich
Yeah.
with history and meaning and spirituality that we forget that when we go to school, we're expecting our children to fit into a round hole, but guess what? That's not what we are anymore.
Well, it's the great American hypocrisy, one of many. My parents included, and Yoshie as well, right? This is the quote unquote cultural melting pot of the world. But, guys, just for your information, you're going to fit the model that we tell you to fit in.
Absolutely.
Wait, what?
And I want to be very clear because that's it can be perceived by your audience as very negative. But at the same time, I will say that I don't know many people. And again, I grew up in rural Georgia. I don't know many people who still fit that principle, those principles that the country was founded on.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge that we, as people who want to impact the next generation, have to figure out.
Yeah.
How are we going to impart all of this amazing knowledge and wisdom and experience and cultural excitement
Yeah.
into our young people so they can be excited? And quite frankly, I will say this, I think they are more open-minded and willing to embrace other, I don't want to say other, people who are not like them than our generation. And I'm going to throw you in, both of you into my generation here. But I feel like the next generation is much more open-minded about embracing everyone.
Well, and I don't take any part of this conversation as negative because, to your point, we peel back the layers, right? And in order to do that, you have to put up the truth so you can peel it back and say, okay,
Yes.
that's what's raw underneath it. And that is the beauty, right? Of saying, well, again, younger children, they are brilliant in being able to observe. And without that certain jadedness, right? They understand what feels good and they understand, wait a minute, this doesn't feel so good. And maybe I'm simplifying it, but I have a note here that says like home sets the baseline and school tests it. And I don't know how you feel about that. If you
And
would agree,
I don't.
please tell me more. Tell me
And
more.
I'll tell you why. I do think that the home sets the baseline, but does the school test the baseline or do they test to their baseline?
Fair point. Fair point.
Because if you look at a classroom today that is, and we're just going to stick with ethnically diverse just because
Yeah.
it's an easy comparison. The baseline that I had is very different than the baseline you had, or someone who has two Caucasian parents who are, sixth, seventh, eighth generation in America. So the baselines are very different at home. The question for me in my head, as you said that, is how do we connect those two baselines to get the outcome of a strong, confident, capable student who can pursue their passion?
How do we do it?
How do we do it?
I'm all ears. What
I know. What's
okay,
what?
let me ask you this
Sure.
because you know in culturally strong households, and again, I'm not saying what strong means. It's up for interpretation
Sure.
of to anyone, right? But something in a way of the home life is really the base of the foundation of any given member of that family. Not all homes are like that, but
Correct.
let's just say for an example, so if culturally strong households that influence is even deeper because it's shaping both safety and identity at the same time.
Correct. I agree with that. I agree with that. Because if we're looking at ethnically diverse homes, parents inherently are going to be more protective, not only of their children, but what they're exposed to, who they're exposed to, and they also want to keep their culture alive for as many generations as possible. And that's why my mother did that, because she wanted us to have a sense of our heritage. And then it becomes my decision how much I want to impart on my children. And so I use the term selective cultural identity. You are selecting pieces of your culture that you are moving forward. And it's interesting because, as you both know, I have two children getting married, and we are having these conversations about what the ceremony looks like. because they've never been exposed to the why of the ceremony.
Interesting.
And so now we're in a place where we're talking about, we're educating. And it's their decision what parts they're going to select. And that's what our children do. If our children see behavior that they don't like, they don't embrace it.
Yeah.
If
Well,
they don't like yelling, they work really hard not to yell because they don't appreciate it. But it's also something that we as adults have to be very mindful of how we are modeling our behavior. So we lived in Florida for a long time, and the mayor of the city and I were good friends. And he came up to me, he goes, Puna, how are your kids all doing so well? And I said, you know as well as I do, you model the best you can, and then you pray the rest of the time because that's all you can do.
yeah.
And I don't mean you have to be religious, but you keep that positive energy that
Yeah.
I'm imparting the behaviors that I would like to see them emulate. And if I'm not emulating them, where are they going to learn them?
Yeah. And that idea, though, you're giving such pearls of insight here. And I'm a curious cat by nature. And, this concept of, and again, inheritance, right? What we carry forward. To be fair, not all of it is good either, right? And it's not all a lot of behavior came out of survival methods and just
Mhm.
out of sheer need to keep going. Doesn't necessarily serve our lineage and serve our children because it might just be overkill. And how then do we, and again, you know, this dance between sending them off to an institutionalized by design sort of network of educational must do's, but also really setting that precedence of, but this is your root. These are your foundational skills. How then do we collectively say, all right, this is what I'm imparting to you, and actually in allowing a bit of vulnerability on a parent's side to say, you know what? And again, let's bring in a bit of self-awareness, true. And I know that from ethnically diverse household, my own included. Self-awareness is not number one on the to-do list. That is not the easiest thing. And so to say here, developing child with a very vulnerable mind, I will also admit defeat. How do we sort of work with that and say, this is where we're building from. This is an honest home. We're going to impart incredible values. But there's a but. I am fallible. And you don't have to mandatorily take everything I'm giving you and carry it on. So, I mean, I know it's a big question, but it's a big one because it's important. And offering that and then saying, now you go into the world and you develop your own sense of self. I'm asking a lot from you now, but
Sure.
what do you feel about all this?
In my opinion, self-awareness is the most lacking quality that we have, is to be able to sit back and reflect on the things that we can do better. And it's so easy to fall into that routine of, well, I don't have time for this and I've just got to keep going. But when we start to break the cycle down slowly, it doesn't have to be all at once, right? But when we break it down slowly, it becomes a habit. And now you have a new habit that's different. And so for me, I grew up in Indians are notorious for not saying, I'm sorry. I mean, it's not just,
Why do you think that is? Just
because they just don't feel the need. They're not self-aware, maybe. They don't feel the need. The patriarchy takes a huge position, and, men are superior and they dominate, and we don't have to worry about the others. But I wanted something different. I want my kids to know that it's okay to make a mistake. I wanted my students to know that it's okay to make a mistake because guess what? We all make 1,000 mistakes a day. And if you don't learn how to own your mistakes from a young age, what happens when you get to your job? Whatever job you're doing, let's say you're great in construction. What happens when the support beam falls in the house?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody's got to take blame, right? And if we're not teaching our children to take responsibility for these small, safe fails that they have made in their lives in school, then we're not setting them up to succeed. I'm not saying the big things we don't talk about, right? You have a big fail, we're going to talk about that. But let them make an app on a test. Let them not turn in a paper, see what happens. That can be the end of the world. What it's going to teach them is responsibility and how to make sure to turn in that paper next time because, oh my gosh, I got an F on it. Oh, I'm hungry. I forgot my lunchbox. Oh my gosh. Mom, can you bring me my lunch? Better start mooching off your buddies because I've got stuff to do. I'm at work. I've got a project. I have a deadline. These are all real life scenarios. And it's not so consequential that it's going to alter their life, but boy, they're going to remember. And I know when we were in the green room a little while ago, we talked about, my big word that I use when, I want my children to, pony up. And it's because, and the word is complacency, guys out there. And it's
Yep.
because we expected them to work hard. We did not expect them to be perfect. But in order to succeed, you have to work hard, but you also have to fail because you don't know what hard work is until you failed. And then you're like, oh, wait, I am more capable. And so this sounds so like pie in the sky, but when we start it early, it's just part of who they are. And they never even realize that you're empowering them. Now it's going to come back and bite you at some point, right? Because they're going to be teenagers and then they're going to say, well, you're the one who empowered me. You're right. I did. And I'm going to take some Advil after this. We got to get through this. But we have to still be able to have a conversation about it. We still have to be rational about it. But empowering these young people early sets them up for success later. And I feel like we've become a society that says, you get a ribbon and you get a ribbon and you get a ribbon. That
Took the words
participation.
right out of my mouth. Yep.
And while that's wonderful, we want everyone to feel like they participated at their best. Not everyone gets a raise when one person on your team gets a raise when you're at work. You don't get promoted all at the same time. And so these are the things that, and I truly believe we have to set a precedent early for them. And I don't think it's hard. I think it's difficult because it's not hard. It's difficult because we are emotional beings and we don't like to see our children upset, whether they're our own or anyone else's, whether it's at school, on the playground, or at an extracurricular. You just don't. It hurts your heart. And so we have this innate desire to go hug them and say, it's going to be okay. But sometimes it's okay to go hug them and say, you know what? I'm so proud that you did your best.
Yeah.
Period. And leave them with something positive.
Well, you know what I like about this conversation? I mean, amongst many, many, many things, the things that are standing out to me as I listen to you is one, I agree. And I think it's important to bring that up. This somewhat seemingly in the last decade or two, everybody is a winner mentality. Yes, I agree. It's good to make sure everyone is acknowledged and seen for effort.
Yes.
But the other side of that, and maybe a very overly simplistic analogy would be there is no light without darkness. We do not appreciate what we have not seen the other side of. And so if it's a consistent, well, yeah, okay, I guess I'll just always win, there's no sort of touchstone on what it feels like to not win. And that goes into this concept, and I think it's a brilliant word that you use in your household, is complacency, because again, that's not negative, it's not positive. It's the result of inaction or action, right? And by default, that takes away the victim mentality of any potential situation that adult children, doesn't matter, any of us may find ourselves in at one point or another, right? And
Absolutely.
there's one concept I want to bring up with you here, because I think and amongst all the listeners, will love to hear your point of view on this. Something I had jotted down before we talked today, this concept of an attachment theory called secure base. And it's the idea that every human being needs at least one safe place, one relationship, one space, one presence where they can fully be themselves without performance or protection. So from that secure base, children can explore. They take risks, they recover from failures faster, and they let the good things in. And from what I've heard you describe today, the home seems to be, and I hate to assume, but is that where you would call a child's secure base, ideally?
Ideally. Yeah.
Ideal.
Our homes are so different from when I grew up. There's so many different variations of what a home looks like, but a child needs to feel secure wherever they are. For example, when I was teaching in a classroom, I had a child in foster care, and he literally ran to the school to my classroom. And I just thought he showed up in class. He was on time. I was great.
Yeah.
And they called me over the intercom and asked if he was there. And I said, yes, what's going on? And they said, he ran away and they want to make sure that he's here. And I said, no, he's sitting right here. And so I pulled him aside and I said, you know what happened this morning? He said, I needed to feel safe. And this is where I feel safe. And so safe is wherever that child feels that they can be themselves. We hope it's in their home environment or wherever they go after school. But sometimes it's school because they have friends and they know the teacher's watching them and they know that they're going to get 2 meals that are warm and good for them and nourishing. So it's so hard to tell where that attachment is going to be. But my hope for every child ever, today and moving forward, is that they have at least some person that they can find comfort and solace and they can become a confidant to. Because it's so hard in today's world to be a child. I don't think I could do it. I stand at the top of every mountain and scream, thank you, parents, because this is a world that is so difficult to navigate in trying to explain what all is happening because everything is moving at such fast speed between technology and news, which I don't, you choose to watch it, you don't choose to watch it, but there's still ramifications of what's happening that we need to be aware of. And so how do our children keep up with it? And we as parents, educators, stakeholders in the next generation find some balance for them.
Well, that being said, and the way that you have illustrated the larger picture of this, I truly appreciate, because, that age-old saying of it takes a village. And that proverbial village is a lot different today, to your point, than it was 40, 50, 60 years ago. And going back to this notion of finding safety or guiding a young mind and a young little being to feeling safe, or trying to promote the development of a secure attachment to something or someone else in an environment that they can build that is feeling safe for them, where they do feel open enough to explore and tap their toes into the great beyond here. It's a big world, it's a scary world. How would you promote that? Because again, the example that you shared with one of your students, it's real. And you're oh so right, and I correct myself as I made a very false assumption of a home being safe. No, absolutely not. There are many unsafe, unpredictable homes, far too many, and that's an unfortunate reality of life. But let's say if we are a neighbor to a child, or if we're a teacher, or a friend, parent of a friend of theirs, or maybe an ancillary adult. And I use the word that you had brought up, actually, this cultural somatics. But I'm taking it a little bit in a different direction, but I'd like your guidance on it. How do you promote that safety in a developing mind, in a beautiful little soul that's trying to navigate this world? And how do you do that in a supportive way?
It's so hard to to imagine what all our children are aware of at such an early age. They're exposed to things that honestly I didn't know till I was an adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Part of it was my naivete, which is fine, but they use big people words, but they don't understand it because their brains haven't developed to understand. And that's the other part of education and raising children that we forget is the brain is still developing until the children are 25.
Yep.
And so we assume so much of what they are doing and they're exposed to that they're going to be able to navigate it and filter it and go, oh no, that's wrong. I'm seeing this on my phone. I shouldn't be looking at. No, they're curious. They're innocent. They're learning. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we are providing those havens. We adults, all adults across the board should be a community that is creating a safe space for our children. And these kids, I hear these little 5 and 6-year-olds talk, and I'm like, where are you getting this from? What are you watching? And I go back to the fact that social media has really changed the way we absorb information, how soon we are exposed to it. And we are putting all of these ideas into an innocent child's mind without giving them context, without giving them the background, without giving them hey, you know what? This is really important. And we're going to talk about this when you are ready, but we're not there yet. That's the safe environment that we need. That's what we need because these children are growing up in a world that you and I and Yoshi never grew up with. And so they have the ability to go into an arena that we can't imagine, but it is incumbent upon us to move fast with them. So I always opened whatever social media app my kids had, with the exception of Snapchat. I never understood Snapchat. I couldn't figure it out.
I still don't.
Why do you take a picture and it just disappears? I don't get it. Anyway, but if they had Instagram, I had Instagram. If they had Facebook, whatever they had. And the rule was I had to follow them. And they're like, why? Why are you going to monitor? That's babysitting. No, because you know what? I want to make sure you're in safe spaces. I will not intrude in your space as long as you're in a safe space. Mm-hmm. The minute I feel like you're walking down the wrong alley, I'm in. And we did. We had a couple of incidences. But it's all about, and everything I'm talking about, I feel like your listeners are going, well, I don't have time. I'm busy.
That's coming. That's coming, Poonam.
Well, and I respect it. I feel it. I have lived it. I embrace it. But our children are our responsibility at the end of the day. And we have to have a pulse on what's going on. We have far too many children who have mental health issues for us not to be checking in on our children and making sure they're safe. We never talked about mental health issues ever until about 15 years ago. And you know why? Because, and I'm holding up my phone, guys, because of the phones, because of cyberbullying, of them going into rooms that are inappropriate for them, that they can't fathom, they can't understand, and they get on the bandwagon in a room and now they're just part of it and they don't know how to get out because they haven't developed to understand all the nuances. And so we talk about mental health a lot, but we don't ever talk about how to prevent it. Because so much of mental health is feeling secure and confident and being in a safe space and being able to unload what's on your mind. I'm not saying there's not chemical imbalances. I'm not making a general statement, but so much of what we can pick up on as adults is all in a conversation.
Well, you know what you're saying too, it's really fascinating to me because you're saying so much more than just what you're saying. I maybe I'm not making sense, but it's a multi-layered, and again, we're peeling it back, right? But it is so multi-layered because in my mind, as I'm hearing you, I'm even thinking of, let's say, getting an infant on a sleep schedule, right? That requires very strict boundaries. Why? Because then that child will have that security, that safety. And from that, they're naturally able to develop as they are designed to develop, right? So it's this concept of, and again, maybe we tap back into this concept of self-awareness that let's redefine what being the quote unquote bad guy is, right? Because, hey, maybe you want to be your kid's best friend. You're doing much more harm than good. Am I incorrect in that thought? Because, even let's say when you break this down developmentally, as you are so eloquently doing, again, I'm thinking of what does a boundary look like for a developing mind? And even scrolling on Instagram or all the Snap, whatever, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
And we've done podcasts on this before. We're not designed for that. We are not made for that. And it is an artificial dopamine hit. And when a child is constantly getting artificial dopamine hits, by default, they do not know how to regulate their own dopamine because you've never given them that chance. Then you ask why mental health is on the rise, why there's such incredible depression and anxiety, because they have no natural inherent regulation skills. And again, I hate to finger point at the caregiver or the teachers or whoever is the prominent figure in that child's life, but we have to challenge and be able to challenge each other in saying, hey, just because you don't want to be the bad guy, I invite you to redefine what that actually is in this context.
The bad guy is the person, and I always felt I was the bad guy.
Did you?
I always felt like that. And
How come?
because I was the one on the ground day to day.
Okay.
My
Heard.
husband went to work
Heard.
and he, and I completely understand. I mean, he was the heavy when he needed to be. I was the heavy when I needed to be. But because I was there all the time, I was seeing so much more and had to be more hands-on with those types of situations. But what happens is when we want to be their friends, there's nothing wrong with being your child's friend. When they need a friend,
Mm.
when they need a parent, it's time to put your parent hat on and say, listen, we crossed a line. We need to have a conversation about this. There doesn't need to be yelling. There doesn't need to be screaming. No tantrums. We're all adults, right? We're molding and we're
Yep.
modeling what we're wanting. We sit down and we talk to them.
Yeah.
And it's not being the bad guy. It's giving them the scenarios and the consequences of what they are doing. This consequence may be small, but the ramifications of the snowball effect can be very dangerous and life altering for you. That's how in my training, that's how we should be parenting. This is small. This is an error. Let's nip it in the bud. And so many times we're like, oh, it's just how they are. It's just how they are. Yes, it is. But there are ways that we can modify behavior without changing the entire personality of the child because we're talking to them. We're giving them equal billing. Because if you're going to have that conversation, you've got to also be self-aware and
Yep.
to sit back and go, okay, please explain to me what brought you to this point. Because it's only fair that we know what those factors were, because those factors may be something that we need to address that could be a sign of something maybe a little more serious. Or maybe it's just something that, they're kids. They're impulsive. They're fun. They're innocent. They're just doing stuff. And maybe it's just like, you know what, buddy, that's not really not appropriate. But I want to know why you thought that was okay. But we have to talk with, you notice I'm using the word with and not
Yes.
at
Yes,
or
ma'am.
to. I'm using the word with because when they get into trouble, God forbid, you want to be the safe haven that they pick up the phone and call. I didn't want any of my students to call anyone but their caretaker. You don't want someone else's parent to parent your child because you're not parenting your child. That's a lot of parenting in there.
Yeah.
But
For good reason.
but it's a matter of invest. And again, I'm going back to your listeners are going, when am I going to fit this in? I have a job. I have deadlines. I got to get dinner on the table. We have to get to soccer. We have to get to ballet. We've got blah, 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 blah. Woo, I get it. Conversations happen in the simplest of ways in the car, while you're cooking, at the dinner table, before they go to bed. Just spend 5 minutes with them. And it sounds like I'm throwing all of this stuff that you need to quit your job and you need to only do this. It's not that. It is our children need to know that they are loved and cared for and they have a safe place in you.
Yeah.
And that's the premise in my opinion, raising children. And it sounds simplistic and it sounds hard. And both can be true at the same time.
And it sounds revolutionary in its quote unquote simplicity. It's showing up and that concept of shared vulnerability that everyone is learning together, and that is a unit of growth. And the beautiful thing as we sort of start to wrap up here is what a gorgeous through line that you tap into in terms of legacy and be it however a family may identify, however an individual may identify, that is alchemizing the legacy of here and now and utilizing what was and bringing it into the present. And what do we need today? And going right back to the heart of what you say, showing up 5 minutes, being present, having the conversation. That's going back to the root of humanity, is it not?
Isn't that why we're here?
There
Is
you,
to connect with other people.
there you go.
And the one, and this is a theory. I'm throwing it out there. I don't have no data.
Tell us. Give it to us.
I think that our phones have taught us not to communicate because it's so easy. I can't tell you how many people, parents I see on their phones and their little bitty babies are hanging off their legs talking to them. And it breaks my heart because those are just such precious times. And there are times you can't help it, right? You got to get the bus ticket or the train ticket or, whatever you have to do. I'm not talking about that time. I'm talking about those moments when you get on the floor with them and you get on their level and you're doing the things that they like.
Yeah.
Because as someone who has children that are no longer in the get on the floor stage,
Yep.
I now have to stand on a stool to see them eye to eye. It's the best way to ensure that our next generation loves each other as much as we love them.
Well, and that's why they call it the most important job in the world, right?
The most important unpaid job in the world.
There you go. There you go.
But when your paydays happen, and my husband taught me this, every time they do something that you're proud of, that's your payday. Every time. Because they're not doing it because they know how to do it. It's something that you have imparted upon them. And that is your payday. And that is what we're put on this earth to do. I believe it with all of my body and soul.
Amen to that. I tell you, what powerhouse way to end. Poonam, will you, before we wrap up, tell our listeners how to find you, how to get in touch with you? I want everybody to listen to your TED Talk. How do they do that?
Okay, so my TEDx talk is on my website. It's poonambsaxena.com, and it's B as in Victor in the middle. My email is poonambsaxena@gmail.com. And you know what? I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and Facebook. Please come find me. Let's have these conversations. I spend a lot of time coaching parents and educators on building bridges to build partnerships so that you don't feel alone. Because this should not be a lonely journey. This is a team journey. And when we get them across the finish line and they've succeeded to whatever they want to do, we've done it together. And that's a beautiful feeling.
Well, and that is what you have done us the honor and blessing with being with us today. That is what we're also trying to do, build bridges instead of burning them. Poona Saxena, you have been beyond incredible. Thank you so much for imparting so much wisdom for us.
Oh my gosh, thank you. It has been an honor to speak with you. And she's hanging out in the back room, doing her amazing stuff, her magic. But it's been an honor because if we don't start having these conversations that are raw and honest, we are just going to be on that hamster wheel. And it's time to get off and let's have those hard conversations so we all benefit moving forward.
And do it together.
That's why we're here. We're a team. We're all a team. We're all working for the same goal.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Listeners, please go and find Poonam immediately. You will not regret it. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for listening, everyone. We are the Raw Onion, and we will see you next week. Over and out. Be well.